is a pleasure to be here today. I'll start with a Wiley story. Got my Wiley hat on after all. And before I tell the story, I'll give you a little bit of background, and you storytellers will perhaps appreciate this more than the others. And the others, if you're not interested, just nod off and wait on the storytellers. This story was told first, or not the first time it was told, but the first time that it was heard and written down was in 1920 on the top of Mount LeConte. Now, the person who heard it that night, among many others, was a woman named Laura Thornborough. Laura heard the tale that night, and then in 1937 she included it in her book, The Great Smoky Mountains. It's a good book. But before she had got to hear that story, she had come up the Rainbow Falls Trail to Mount LeConte. Do any of you know the Rainbow Falls Trail? Yeah. The beautiful falls up there? It's not an easy walk in the park even now, but back in 1920, it was very difficult. And Laura describes that they had to climb over these great boulders, they had to crawl under trees. They were going through brambles and briars, and it was a tough hike, and they were panting by the time they got to LeConte. But when they got there at cliff tops, and they beheld the beauty, the majesty, the vastness of the Great Smoky Mountains, the trek was well worth it. Well, that evening, after that long journey, they got to rest. And they had a little fire. And so they were sitting around the fire, and there were two guys with them. One of them was named Wiley Oakley. How many of you have heard tell of Wiley Oakley? Yeah. A couple over here. Good. He was known as the Roman Man of the Mountains. He was a very well-known guide in his day. The park designated him as the #1 guide. He's also the man who named Rainbow Falls, as well as some wildflowers and some place names, things like Hearts Are Busting with Love, my favorite, Doll's Eye, Huggins Hell, just to name a few. So Wiley was there, and they coaxed Wiley to tell a tale. Now, you know how it is with storytellers. You can hardly get them to say a single word. And then it's even harder to shut him up. Well, Wiley agreed to tell a story that had happened to him, one that he had instigated. And he started out saying something like, well now, I was going up to Mount LeConte with some gals, and I carried some potatoes along with me. I like potatoes cooked in the fire. Well, we got up there and we refreshed ourselves at the spring there. And you know what's amazing to me? That spring is a mile higher than Gatlinburg down in the valley, and you still got all that good water out. Well, after they'd done what they needed to do that day, it was going to be a cold night in the Smoky Mountains, and well, I thought, well, it's cold up here in these Smokies, and I don't want my potatoes to freeze tonight. So it was dark by that time, and then you got a lantern, and you got a little shovel and potatoes, and went over to a big old balsam tree. And so he dug some holes in the ground there, in the roots of that tree, and he buried those potatoes, covered them up, and then went back and bedded down for the night. Well, the next morning, while it was still dark, that group of campers, they went out to Myrtle Point to see the sunrise. The beautiful golden sun rising, and just painting each ridge as it went along with that golden light. They went back, they had a fire started, and then Wiley realized he had to get rid of those taters. So he went to the balsam tree, and he started digging up the potatoes. Well, as he was digging them up, two of the gals from the group saw him, were nearby, and one of them looked at that big tree and said, Wiley, what kind of tree is that great big old tree there? And I said, well, that there is a balsam tree. And he went on to say, now, just as a joke, I never dreamt that they believed me. But I said, and these here are balsam potatoes. Well, one of those girls was real surprised, and she bought it. The other girl was more of a, you can't pull the wool over my eyes kind of gal. And she might have been thinking to herself, prove it. Well, Wiley got potatoes out, and that one gal who talked to him first, she was so excited about it. She said, I never allowed that balsam trees have potatoes at their roots. And I want to taste one. And Wiley was sure that she could. So we went back, he cleaned up those potatoes, he put them in the ashes of the fire, and they cooked up till they got tender, and got them out, cooled them down a little bit, and then he gave one of the potatoes to that first gal. And she broke in half and gave half to her friend. Well, the first guy tasted it. This is good. Yeah, it's a little stronger than other potatoes. The other girl, I think her name was Jan, she said, but it tastes like any other potato to me. But the first guy said, oh no, it's a lot stronger. And Wiley said, it just tickled me to hear that gal say that the potatoes were stronger. He said, now I do allow that potatoes cooked in the fire like that, they may get a little grain of a smoke taste to them. But when she said that they were stronger than ordinary potatoes, I could just bust out laughing. It was so funny to me that she believed it. But Wiley said he didn't bust out laughing. He just let it go on. Well, after they broke camp, they were headed down the Allen Cave Trail, beautiful trail, Wiley's favorite. And as they were going down that trail, that first gal, she came up to Wiley and she said, Wiley, would you do something for me? I'd like to take some of the balsam potatoes back home. Would you find a balsam tree and dig me up some so that I can take them to Knoxville? Well, Wiley was caught in a lie. Now, he could have told the truth, but maybe Wiley was like a lot of storytellers that I know, not me, of course, but a lot of storytellers who figure that truth, well, it's just not as important if you're going to tell a story. There's a phrase about that. Anybody remember that phrase? It's something about, don't let truth stand in the way of a good story, or in this case, a good joke. So Wiley just let it go on by. But then he explained, now, she balsams, they're the only kind of balsams that have taters at their roots. He said, but I'll keep my eye out. Well, now, Wiley was right. He said that she balsam trees were one kind, but there's also another kind, he said. There's the he balsam. And he said that mountain folks call the spruce the he balsam, and they call the mountain balsam, the fir, they call that the she balsam. Which may sound like a load, but actually it is true. The red spruce is nicknamed which one is it? The he balsam. And the Fraser fir is nicknamed the she balsam. Sometimes called the blister balsam, because that particular tree has a blister on its bark. And that bark oozes that little balsam tar, that milky substance, and you can use that tar to put on cuts and wounds and all. So there is a she balsam and a he balsam. Now I don't know why the mountain people call them he balsam and she balsam, unless it's the fact, and this is the fact, that the he balsam does not give milk, does not have that sap. And the she balsam does. And the she balsam is the only evergreen that has these upright, conifers. The only one. But let me tell you, neither one of them have potatoes at their roots. So Wiley and the group headed on down that trail. Wiley continued to point out things along the way. Allen Cave, which is not really a cave, but an overhanging bluff, and had this valuable saltpeter in it, which is used to make gunpowder. So during the Civil War, both sides coveted the materials from that particular cave. Went on down and saw the beautiful views. They saw the Duck Hawk Bridge that has a hole in it, big enough for some people to stand up in. And went on down further, and they got down to a place that is now called Arch Rock. And just to fill you in a little bit about that, it was Wiley's grandfather, Harvey Henderson Oakley, who first told Wiley about it. Is that there's this queer cave where you can stand if it's raining, and you can cast your line into the river, and you can catch fish and not get wet. And Wiley later explored that area and found it for himself. And then in the 30s, when the park personnel were laying out the various hikes to Mount LeConte, Wiley took them to this place that we call Arch Rock now. And he showed them, and they were so impressed that they changed the proposed trail of Allen Cave over so that you could go through Arch Rock. And Wiley also worked with the CCCs to clear out that trail up in the 30s. So they saw that view and went on down, and all the time, Wiley had his eye out, looking for that sheep balsam tree to eat them taters. But unfortunately, Wiley never could spot one of those sheep balsams to get those taters for that gal. And I'll tell you why. Because the spruce fir forest only grow way up at high elevations like at Mount LeConte. So they couldn't possibly have been one of those trees down there with the taters. Well, the gal was disappointed, but she went on, they all went their ways. Wiley was in Knoxville one time. After that, and on the street he met a man. The man came up to him, young man. The man said, "Wiley, why did you tell those gals that story about balsam potatoes, that yarn? I mean, they come back to Knoxville, and they told everybody that Wiley Oakley told them the balsam trees had potatoes on their roots. And they had to eat some of them, too. Why'd you do that, Wiley?" And Wiley said, well, he started giggling again, remembering that time. He said, well, you know, I never dreamt that they'd believe me on that story. And usually, I'm going to tell a great big old yarn like that, I'll yodel a little bit to let people know that it's a big one and they can believe it or not. And that was a big one, all right. So this is a story with a yodeling in it, and Wiley did not yodel. So I think we ought to make up for that. And I think that we ought to yodel. Now, I'm not Wiley. I don't look like Wiley. I don't sound like Wiley. I don't dress like Wiley. And I certainly do not yodel like Wiley. But let's give it a try. I will shout out a phrase of the yodel. Then I want you to echo it back. Okay? Okay. You are game. A little lady, oh. A little lady, oh. A little lady, oh. A little lady, oh. A little lady, lady, lady. A little lady, lady, lady. Let's stick to storytelling, shall we? Now, my takeaway from this story is this. You may not be able to believe every word that comes out of Wiley's mouth, but you better believe that you will probably enjoy it. And I hope you enjoy Wiley and the balsam potatoes.